Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. My name is Gwen and today I'm going to be reviewing all the books that I read in October. Now, October was a little bit of a rough month for me. I unfortunately had a small bout of anxiety for 2.5 weeks or so. In the last week and a half of October though, I pushed myself to try to get as many books read as possible for the Black Aweenathon that I was participating in, and I pretty much successfully did it except for one book, but I finished that book within 2 days of November. So the other thing I wanted to mention, when this video is uploaded, it will be on November 7th, which is my birthday. So happy birthday to me. And without further ado, let's get into all of these books. The first book I read was The Color Purple by Alice Walker, and I gave this book 5 stars. In The Color Purple, you are following Celie through the book through letters that she writes to God, and then eventually she writes letters to her sister Nettie once she realizes her sister has been trying to contact her for some time. This book is immensely powerful, beautiful, and traumatic, I think is a word I would use for this book. The reason why I gave it 5 stars is because it was just beautifully done, and I felt like the characters just shone through the letters, and I loved every second about learning about them and more of their story. Now, there are a lot of types of abuse in this book, so there are a lot of trigger warnings for it. Just so you're aware, some of them are verbal, physical, and mental abuse between parental figures, platonic relationships, and romantic relationships. Again, if any of those personally affect you, this book may be very traumatizing to read through. But overall, I did enjoy this book and I thought it was a fantastic read. The next book I tried to read and then failed to read during the month of October was How to Be Anti-Racist by Ibram X. Kendi, and the reason why I had trouble with reading this book was because it was during this time that I hit my anxiety 2.5 week period where I couldn't read anything. And I knew if I tried to pick up this book, I wasn't going to give it its full potential and enjoyment if I read it while I was having anxiety issues. What I can say is I did finish this book yesterday, which was Monday, and I thoroughly enjoyed it and thought it was a really, really good first step book into anti-racism. It really reads like you're going to a lecture class every week and you get to learn more about the professor along with general information about the subject matter. The last third of this book is actually not the book itself, but it's all the information, the huge bibliography of what Kendi used, and you can do and find more reading from. So he did a lot of research, and he expresses that in one of the last few chapters, how long it took him. This book was very insightful, and he used his own life to tell the story of how he changed from being racist to anti-racist, as well as his learning about different subjects and how they all apply to being anti-racist. So overall, I gave this book 4.75 stars, and I really think it's a great staple if you're trying to learn more about anti-racism work. So the next book I tried to read when I felt like I wanted to jump back into reading was The Year of the Witching by Alexis Henderson, and I was so excited when I got this from the library, and it fell into my lap in October, thankfully. I gave this book overall 4.5 stars. It was such a fun read, and it was definitely what I needed to jump back into reading again and getting out of my slump of reading for the month. In this book, we are following Emmanuel, who's 17 years old, and she lives in a town called Bethel, and it's kind of ruled by a cult religion practice. It's very culty. So we're following Emmanuel as she's trying to figure out what happened to her mother. Her mother did pass away after giving birth to her, and there's hints that her mother might have done something in the dark wood that most people completely avoid. So she really wants to figure out what happened. And that kind of starts the whole problems ensuing in this book. But it is in a different world entirely from our own. So there is magic, there are witches, there are demons, there are plagues. It's fantastic. It is also labeled as a horror fantasy. So if that's also something you're interested in, highly recommend. Trigger warnings for this book. Blood. So much blood. It's everywhere. So if you really don't like blood or bloody things, I would not recommend this book. There is also abuse and child abuse. The abuse side physically does get shown, but not very extreme, I would say. And there is pedophilia that happens, but it's only talked about afterwards, not during. You don't see it. It's set in passing instead of being physically written. So that is The Year of the Witching. The reason why I gave it 4.5 stars instead of 5 stars, even though I clearly enjoyed it, was because the ending of this book, I just felt like we could have had a few more pages and a few more deaths. The next book I read was The Deep by River Solomon. I gave this book overall 4 stars. So the plot of the book is we follow Yetu, who is a mermaid or siren that lives in the deep oceans of the Atlantic, and she is the historian for her people. She has over 600 years worth of memories and stories about where her people came from. And this is really bringing her down to a point where she is depressed and feels extremely lonely among her people. Once a year, there is a ceremony called the Remembering, where the historian tells the whole story of the lives of their people, in which the historian finally feels relief, or so Yetu explains, and the Remembering then gives it back to the historian, and everyone else can leave without having to keep those memories, but feeling like they're a part of something again. And Yetu doesn't want to get the memories back, so instead she runs away. The rest of the book, we follow her journey of leaving and also of her kind of growing in a way. And I don't want to get more spoilery than that because it is a novella, so it's very short. The reason why I gave this 4 stars was because the beginning of the book and the end of the book kind of felt to me. Like, it wasn't a great start, and I feel like it wasn't a comfortable ending. It also was a very sad book, and coming out of a very deep anxiety, dense 2 weeks, jumping into a very sad book was not what I should have done, and I think I would have enjoyed it more if I hadn't had some mental health issues going on. So again, there are some triggers for this book, mainly depression, suicidal thoughts, and attempts at suicide. There is also talk of the Atlantic slave trade as well. What I do want to mention at the end of this book is for those who have read this book that are part of the Black diaspora, they have said that this book means a lot to them and they feel very seen and very heard. So I think their reviews are much more powerful than this one will be, and I highly recommend finding and watching and reading those reviews over this one because I think it's more important to hear from them than a white person reading this book. The next book I read, speaking of very sad books, is Giovanni's Room by James Baldwin. This was the group read for Black Aweenathon, and man, don't read The Deep and Giovanni's Room back to back unless you want to be sad. Then by all means do. Giovanni's Room is about our main character David, who tried to propose to a girl in Paris. That girl was like, you know what? I need to think about it. So she went to Spain. And as that girl goes and figures out her life in Spain, David goes to a bar and gets introduced to Giovanni, who is a new bartender. Then the drama ensues because literally this is such a dramatic book. So overall, I gave this book 5 stars because the thing that hit me the most with this book was the writing. James Baldwin is a beautiful writer. I really felt for the characters, but I also really hated them. Their decision making was sometimes one of the worst I have ever seen, and sometimes the most understanding that you could possibly imagine. So the trigger warnings for this book are pretty simple and straightforward. We do have sex scenes. We do have abuse of alcohol excessively, to the point where I felt like, where is there a throw up scene? Someone's gotta throw up. There's way too much alcohol being consumed. And then we also have homophobic tendencies, words, and physical abuse because of that. But overall, it's a stunning book, and I am really wanting to read more of Jane Baldwin's work. So the next book I picked up, I was like, okay, we gotta get out of this very down, depressing, honestly, book reading. And we're gonna jump into The 100,000 Kingdoms by N.K. Jemisin. This book was so fun. Overall, I gave it 4.5 stars. It was something that, again, was kind of like A Year of the Witching, which is jumpstart to my reading to give it just more of a fun element rather than being sad. So we're following Yane. This is how she spells it. I am unsure how to pronounce, so my apologies, but we are following her going back to her grandfather's castle called Sky because she's been asked to come, and he then says that she is one of his chosen heirs, and then chaos literally ensues. That plot point happens in like 20 pages very, very quickly, and the rest of the book is still fast, but not as fast as the first 20 pages. The other plot point of this book is that our main character is trying to figure out what happened to her mother because she believes she was assassinated. So she thinks when she gets to the main kingdom of the 100,000 kingdoms, she will be able to figure out the answers of what happened to her mother. There is so much drama that happens in this, but not just like drama of gossip, but like also drama of how this world was created and all about the gods. It's really, really interesting, and it definitely kept my interest in the book. Now for the 4.5 star reason, it was more so about the ending of this book. I felt like it was too tied nicely in a bow for me, and that's kind of like just a personal preference. I think if you like happy endings, you will definitely enjoy this book overall. But yeah, that's my only like comment about the book negatively. This book is so fun, such a joy, and such fast-paced reading. If that's what you're looking for right now, highly recommend reading this book. The next book I read was In Kindness of Ghosts by Rivers Solomon, and I gave it 4 stars. This is a book about Aster, who is living on a spaceship named Matilda, and she is kind of a medical practitioner in training. We meet her in the first chapter amputating a child's foot due to the fact that in the lower decks the heating has been turned off. The reason why I gave 4 stars overall is because I did not love how the plot was handled in this book. It was a slow read up until I think it was the last 30 to 25 pages of the book, and then the book took a left-hand turn that I wasn't seeing coming. I don't think many readers saw coming, as I saw other reviews of this book. It was not great the way that was handled. What I loved about this book was the characters and the representation this book holds. It's immense, it's powerful, and I loved every minute that we had connections with these characters. I also loved the characters when they had their own stories told through their perspectives, and we got to see their perception of Aster through their lens. I think those single chapters were really, really helpful in understanding who Aster was from the outside in, when we got Aster mostly from the inside out. The last book I read, which actually was a comic book series, was A House of Whispers by Nalo Hopkins and artwork done by Dominique. So this comic book series I gave 3 stars overall, and the only good thing about this series for me was the artwork and a few of the characters, not even all of them. The plot of the comics is that 4 girls found a book that one of the gods of voodoo recognizes as their own, and they start doing a telephone game between all 4 of them. And one of the girls gets a weird medical thing happened to her, and she gets sent to the hospital, and turns out she wakes up and she feels like she's dead, and a plague ensues. And I have learned from this comic book series, I don't want to read about plagues when we already have a pandemic going on. Now, the rest of the story is how the voodoo gods got kicked out of the bayou, which in this world is where they usually reside, and they get kicked into the dreaming world with some other gods who are hanging out there, and they're trying to help the voodoo gods go back because they've lost all their powers. So then the voodoo gods figure out that a pandemic is ensuing Louisiana, specifically New Orleans, and they need to get back to their bayou in order to help this pandemic not go viral, which arguably they don't accomplish by the end of this grouping of comics. Now, there are 4 more groupings of this comic, so obviously I'm guessing the story gets concluded at the end, but I have no interest of finishing this story. The 2 issues that I had with this comic book series were the dialogue between some of the characters and also the transitions between both the real world and the god world. Some of the transitions were very abrupt and weren't smoothly done, and then I found that some of the dialogue seemed to jump, as though one of the characters was 2 dialogue lines ahead of the other, and I didn't understand how that character got to that point in the dialogue, and then they just went with it. There was like no understanding from your perspective as a reader how they got to that point. So unfortunately for me, comics might not be my forte of reading, and that's okay. I was happy to try it out. I think I still will try a graphic novel if it intrigues me, but as for right now, I don't think I'm going to go into the comic book world. And that is it for my October wrap up. Thank you so much for watching, and thank you for getting all through these 7 to 8 books, I think. As always, linked down below are links to petitions and donation sites to help the Black Lives Matter movement, along with anything else happening in the world today that needs our attention. If you would like to follow me anywhere else on social media, my links are also down below, and I will see you in my next video. Bye!